Welcome back again, guys, for another year of March Madness coverage through Hauser Media, pushing the pylon and collaborating with Unknown Zone. My good friend Tevin back for another year. How you doing, my friend?
I'm great, brother. I'm great. How you doing?
Doing well. Let's get into these tournament talks right here. This is arguably the best time of the year. I'm not even a college basketball number one sport guy, but this March Madness is close to number one sport in the world for that time of year.
It's Christmas. It's Christmas. It's Christmas all over again.
It's Christmas for sure, and to celebrate Christmas, we got to talk about Christmas Eve first. We have a couple 11 seeds here. Two games. We have North Carolina and San Diego State tonight when we're filming this on Tuesday. We have Xavier in Texas on Wednesday, tomorrow night. Quick question for you. Do any of these games intrigue you? Do you think any of these four teams can win their first round when the actual tournament starts?
I don't think any four have a shot to win the following game at all. I have Illinois, and I believe the other one is Ole Miss.
Yes, Ole Miss.
Both moving on. Yeah. But if I had to pick a winner, right, I have to pick a winner here to at least advance my bracket. I'd go with probably North Carolina, and my gut tells me SEC, so I'd probably go with Texas.
Texas seems to be a pick. I tend to agree with you on that one as well. Let's get right into the tournament. We have four regions filled with teams, a lot of talent in this tournament. But in one region in particular, that West region, Tevin, I'm looking at that as a fan from the outside that has watched a moderate amount of college basketball this year. Nothing compared to you, but I can look at this and say, how in the world did all these teams get in the one region? Whose fault is that? What happened here?
This all came down to, I want to say the committee's just very biased in a lot of ways. I don't get how you can put Patino, Self, Calipari, Dan Hurley in the same bracket. That's honestly the most disgusting thing. Then you have Florida, who did what they just did, and then they got what looks like would be technically the worst one seed because their gauntlet to the Final Four is ridiculous. After they just destroyed everyone in their conference.
Would it be fair to say that the talent resides in this region, but the fact they have to all play each other makes it hard to believe a team from the West can actually win the whole championship?
Yeah, I'd agree 100%. I think it's going to be whoever gets out of here, you're probably lucky you got out. You're lucky. Whoever it is, whoever ends up getting out, it's you probably went through hell to get out.
So that being said, looking at this bracket, we have a few good matchups here. Personally, for me, I think UConn Oklahoma is that big ticket game, that first round in that region you want to see. But I know you as a Kansas fan, you can't turn down a Coach Cal Bill Self matchup. Slugfest for the ages, as always. So when you look at that, it could be one of those games or one I'm missing here. What's the most intriguing matchup in this West region that is stacked to the brim with talent?
Most intriguing out of all the games could probably be Memphis, Colorado State. I know a lot of people don't, basketball enthusiasts. Colorado State's very good. Their conference is pretty good as a whole. Memphis is another team that comes from one of those, what we would call like a mid-major conference. So it's kind of like a mid-major matchup. And they wouldn't be far off from one another, in my opinion, in terms of talent. I think Memphis is good, obviously, but I think that's probably the most intriguing one. The only reason why I'm not picking Grand Canyon in those teams is just because we saw what Grand Canyon did last year. So, you know what I mean? I don't think Maryland's going to take them. I hope they don't, because if not, you're going to get beat up. So,
Powerhouse again. I can't overstate it enough. Powerhouse region, one of the, in least in recent memory, I think the most powerful one I've seen.
yeah,
Who
this
comes
is
out of
nuts.
it? Who comes out of it, Tevin? Who ultimately wins this? And we look back and say they were the dogs, no pun intended if it is UConn, but the dogs out of this region.
I think the way Florida's been playing, um, I would go with Florida off the strength that they shoot the ball better than everyone in the whole region. But their two seed in their bracket, aka St. John's, they are coming in the same way, rolling in, winning like 7, 8 games in a row here. Both teams are going to be hot. If that does end up being the Elite Eight matchup, that both teams are going to be like on a 10-game win streak and battle it out right there, and that's going to be probably one of the best games of the. If that ends up making it, that's probably going to be one of the best games in the NCAA tournament. And I think that game will probably cost someone a championship because that's how grueling of a game it's going to be.
So your pick out of that region?
If I had to pick, it'd be Florida for sure.
Florida.
I just think the shooting is a lot of volume there, and they have a very deep team. So, and they're playing for their coach. He beat the allegations. I think that's another thing people forgot about early in the year. Their coach was getting investigated for whatever it was that he did on campus or something. Ends up being, he beat the allegations, and it looks like the team kind of went around them.
So the Florida boy takes the Florida Gators. A lot of people back home, if they watch this, will be very happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Going into another region here, and it's no disrespect to big teams like Alabama or Wisconsin or even Arizona, but the Duke Blue Devils is the 1 seed on this side, have a much easier time than the one we just talked about. How do you feel about Duke here? Without disrespecting the other teams, do you feel like it could be a potential cakewalk for the Blue Devils?
I definitely believe it's a cakewalk for the Blue Devils. They have NBA size. They're big. They have the number 1 pick. He's a little banged up. I still think they don't really need him for the first matchup. But they're, again, just NBA size. They're tall. They're big. They play great defense. They remind me of Virginia when they won a couple years ago. Same defense, more size. And probably a little bit better, like, playmaking because you have, like, a Cooper Flag, Concanipple, and stuff like that. But defense like Virginia, but score like an NBA team because they have NBA size all over the court.
Now, with that logic, is the easiest possibly for Duke a cakewalk here. Going lower down on that region, Alabama. Do we see Alabama keeping it hot the way they face up? If they beat Robert Morris, it's St. Mary's or Vanderbilt, and then eventually becomes Wisconsin, BYU, VCU eventually. Do you think Alabama is the team that meets Duke there at the final, or the Elite Eight in that case? Excuse me.
My guess would be no. Only off the strength of, not that they're not great. I believe they lead the country in scoring. Don't officially quote me on that, but I'm like 98% sure they are. They score at will. The bad part was their last 2 games they played rolling into this tournament, though. They shot the ball awful. They have a couple days off. Maybe they regroup and get back together on the 3-ball, but they're not going to be able to go 2-20 one of these games and then beat like a Wisconsin, a Vanderbilt, St. Mary's, BYU, those teams. They're not going to depend on the 3-ball like that compared to them. So I don't believe that it's going to be easy for them. If I had to pick, I'd probably pick the field over them getting to the Elite Eight, honestly. And that says a lot. But I just don't believe. I think they had some bad games, and I think that stinks to have those bad games right now.
So, Duke Blue Devils likely making it to the Elite Eight, I hear you say. Does anyone knock off Duke, or is Duke your Final Four pick out of that region?
Duke is with 150% my pick for that region, for sure. Yeah. I think it's a cakewalk for those guys. They're very good, and they backed it up. I think the conference is soft, but they have the most NBA kind of developed team in terms of size. I think that comes a long way in this tournament.
So bouncing to the next region, that would potentially, I believe, yes, be playing Duke in the Final Four. We have Houston as the 1 seed in the Midwest. We have teams like Tennessee in there. We have teams like Kentucky, of course, everyone's going to talk about. A chippy underdog like McNeese State that has been catching some popularity for the most wild reasons. But
2 years.
One of the games I want to talk about here in that Midwest region might be random to some people. I'll call it the Battle of the U's. You have UCLA, you have Utah State there. UCLA is a popular team for people to pick in college brackets. They're the mecca of college basketball if you go all the way back. They're a very successful team that people are going to jump on, a.k.a. the public. Utah State, Tevin. Tell me about Utah State here, and why should we care about Utah State before we fill in that UCLA for sure?
Another team that plays in, I believe, in that West Coast, not the West Coast Conference, but I believe it's like the Mountain West, I believe they're in. That conference is hell. You play everyone. Nevada, you randomly get like Fresno State's good, but I believe New Mexico, all those teams come out of there. So they're battle tested all the way through. I believe they won. They didn't win their conference tournament, but they won the regular season, and they were dominating in the regular season. UCLA, Nick Cronin. I like him. Obviously, he'll be a Hall of Fame coach at some point of his life. but I feel like he just isn't the guy, and I think that's going to cost him, sadly, here.
So you got Utah State with an upset as the 10 seed down there.
Yeah, yeah.
As
And not because I think it's far off, though. Don't. For public thinks it's 7 through 12 are very close teams, all of them. 7 through 12 is very close. I even think 4 through 13, possibly, you could say is very close.
Well, you mentioned 12. I'm going to stick with 12 because that's the underdog the public I hear is talking about. McNeese State, they're going against Clemson. Clemson again. See, for me, at least, outside perspective, I feel like Clemson's a team I pick against a lot in the tournament, and they end up getting me mad because they go and win in the first round when you have a team that was going to the third round playing them early here. Is the public onto something with McNeese, or do you think Clemson is that team that's going to disappoint us again when we pick against them?
Clemson is exactly what you said. They've done that like the last couple of years. They've been like a lower seed, like like that 9-8 range.
Felt
and then
like
they
that.
just beat someone that they're not supposed to beat kind of early, and then they make a nice run in the tournament. I think McNeese has a nasty taste in their mouth though from last year. They were 31-3, I believe, going in the tournament, rolling everyone in their conference and stuff. This year, I believe they played a better non-conference. Got a little bit more respect from the country again, and shout out to their team manager, whoever it is. My boy's famous right now, so I think they're rolling in with that swag, that little comfortability. They look a little bit more out there on the public. I'll probably go with them, though. They got a lot of athletes, man. They get out and they run. They're small, but they play a fun style of basketball. It kind of reminds me of Florida Gulf Coast, kind of, but not as explosive with the dunks and stuff like that. But kind of like that, athletic guys run up and down. Clemson, I don't know, man. It's like every year I don't like them. Like you just said, every year I kind of look at them like, and then they do something. But this is, again, I think that's probably the most intriguing matchup there. Them, that Utah State, UCLA obviously won, and probably them secondly will probably be the second best matchup.
By the way, those NIL endorsement deals include Buffalo Wild Wings and Insomnia Cookies. That's the best college combination you could get besides probably a Hooters.
That's crazy. I need to be a sports manager at this point because I'm getting paid.
If I learned anything, it's never too late in life to follow your dreams. So the Midwest here, I'm going to ask you, who you got coming out of it? We didn't talk about Kentucky. Houston seems to be that mainstay dominant team that you want to be trendy and pick against, but you pay, it costs you to do so. But Tennessee, also another team, really intriguing out of that SEC. And they, as a 2 seed, have a chance to run the table down there. Who do you have coming out of the Midwest, Tevin? Help us out here. This might be the toughest side to pick, in my opinion.
This is my toughest pick only because the two best teams in their both sides are very locked in on defense, and sometimes they forget the offense every now and then. I think Houston's fixed that problem a little more this year than most recent. So if I had to, sadly, I hate picking ones to get out. I not to go back to the West or anything, but the West is where, if Florida doesn't get out, I'm not surprised. If Houston doesn't escape here, I'd be shocked if Houston doesn't get out of here. That would be like a wow, someone did something historical because they dominated the Big 12. They dominated anybody else they kind of played. They were 4-3 to start off the year. Everybody kind of counted them out. And then by 2 months later, everyone's like, oh, they're Houston again. So, early in the year, they played a lot of tough games. They played Auburn. They played a lot of tough teams like that super early. So they're very battle tested. They're an old team. It could be their year. Could be one of those years for them finally. They've been knocking on the door a lot.
So the public just heard the basketball experts so far. Take Florida, take Duke, take Houston. Sometimes, people, it does not pay off to overthink it and try to pick cool seeds that no one else will pick. We have the South region. We have teams like who you went big for last year, Tom Izzo's Michigan State. Tough time of year to pick against a team like that with a coach like that. You have teams like Michigan here, who I think everyone's talking about possibly being upset, but they go and dominate in regular season to finish strong. You have a Yale in there who won their conference. You have Auburn, who, in my opinion, was going into this possibly my pick for the national champion. Before we get into other teams, though, Auburn had a few guys getting banged up at the end of their conference championship game. Do you have an idea of that for the tournament? You think that'll affect them, or you think they're fine?
No, they were on such a high for a long time. They had to come back, not back to reality, because you're due to lose games. They'll figure it out. They got a great coach, Hall of Fame coach Bruce Pearl. They'll be fine. Um, Sadly, like I think the other two conferences, they have 15 quad one wins. I don't know if the public knows what that means, but
Go explain it to us. Go ahead.
Quad one wins are flat out NCAA tournament wins. Are you playing teams that are going to be there pretty much? And it all comes down to like strength of schedule, your conference, who you play, like who you are in those conferences. Auburn had 15 of them. They were the number one team. They had the most wins in quad ones. They dominated. They were winning. They were in their conference at one point, and they had the second highest win margin behind Duke, I believe, and they were beating teams by an average of 15. Their conference had 14 teams make the tournament, so that's how dominant they were at one point. I think there's one team that I see there kind of give them issues, but
who's that? Go ahead, spoil it for us.
An interesting game. For the public, from what I hear, from what I wasn't hearing this much, but Jim has informed me that UC San Diego has been picked to beat Michigan. In my opinion, though, I believe
Alea might be a fan of that pick too, from what I heard.
She might be rolling with UC San Diego and telling me a sign here. But I believe that Michigan, in terms of basketball, they have 2 7-footers that can cause problems to an Auburn team that is big. Johnny Broom down there. They have size to match up with that down low, physical presence of Auburn. But again, right, UC San Diego 30-win team comes in here and beats them, where none of us are shocked because, like I said, 4-13 isn't really far off. I just feel like they match up, for me because of height. I think height matters this late in the year. If you have a big team, it kind of helps. But, I mean, I don't know. Like you said, Tom Izzo, he's tough, but I think he has the tougher side of the bracket for sure on his end.
So you said most intriguing matchup, maybe Michigan, UC San Diego. Did you have another one in here that you said, make sure at this time, on this date, you get your butt in a seat to watch the TV, and this game has to be on it?
That Marquette, New Mexico game is very intriguing. I think that New Mexico is... We've known them to get to the tournament the last couple of years, here and there. But, Marquette is, like I always say, they're not a big team. They're little guards. They're all kind of small, and they kind of play helter-skelter. When you can match up like that, I think it's those outcomes. That's where you see the upsets, when teams are playing 4 out, 1 in. And I think those teams are easier to beat this time of year. That's why, like Alabama, I struggle to pick them a lot because that 4 out, 1 in never works. Unless you're UConn or someone like that last year was historically just amazing. But yeah, I don't know if I can go. I don't know. My gut tells me Cam Jones gets it done. My basketball knowledge tells me New Mexico beats them.
Very interesting one there. I actually like New Mexico to win that one as well.
Yeah.
So we talked about... actually, before I get your pick on this region, I do want to ask you about one team, very high seed here. Maybe it's my not ball knower showing here. Iowa State, is that a team that's very impressive here that we should definitely be respecting this late in the season? Or are they a high seed for some other reason that maybe early on they caught fire and they're not as good now?
No, they were a little banged up throughout the year in the Big 12 for a couple games. They had some guys in and out of lineup. Even in the Big 12 tournament, I think they sat out Keyshawn Gilbert in the tournament at one point. That was the game. They ended up losing that game to BYU, the game he sits, ironically. They actually played Auburn in Maui to start off the year in the Maui Invitational. And they were up 18 in that game and blew the lead and lost the game in Maui to get to the championship. So, if I'm going off of their potential, I think that will be the team that gets to the Elite Eight versus them. I think they have a lot of guards. They have a great coach. Their coach turned it around in 3 seasons. They were 2-22 3 years ago. They've been now a 25+ win team every year since. So they're elite. They have they're so good, their leading scorer comes off the bench. So they're one of those type of teams. They have it all. They kind of got it all the way through. Same thing for me though. Like they kind of match up decently with Auburn because they have Jefferson transfer from St. Mary's. So I think maybe them as well. Like if they're kind of rolling, but like I always tell everybody, right? You live and die by the three. When they don't hit, they're tough to watch. But when they're on fire and we're kind of rolling, and big guys are they're a tough team to play.
I do actually want to just ask about one more game here. If you remember last year, I pulled a game out and said that, it's the 8-9 matchup, and that's how we talked about Michigan State. I believe they were the 8-9 seed last year.
Yep.
And that was a fun game, and it proved out that you were right there. So I want to ask about another 8-9 game. These two bird teams with Louisville and Creighton. So I don't think either one of them is going to upset Auburn, right? I'll just spoil that right now. However, these are two teams where I just feel like there's a lot going on there. And I've talked highly of Creighton a lot this year. I think Creighton could be a great team if they weren't playing Auburn in the second round. Could make some type of run. Looking at this game, though, Tevin, Louisville, Creighton, what do you see happening here? And will this be an interesting game, or do you think one team has just an advantage that's not going to make it fun to watch?
Louisville's definitely the more athletic team of the two. If you're going like athletes on the floor, it advantages Louisville. If you're coming down to the fundamental of the game, though, give me Creighton in that aspect because they find ways to get a lot of easy buckets, especially to their big guy. I like the matchup. I think it's one of the more even, like kind of evenish 8-9 matchups in terms of like you don't really know what you're going to get from either group. But it's a very intriguing matchup. Like it's very like because for me, I just don't believe Louisville should have been ranked that high anyways. And I feel like Creighton played very good for having an injury to one of their best players and sustained that and kept their team afloat all year. So that comes down to coaching, your team buying in, So like those little things, I think it's a very intriguing game. If I had to pick, I'm probably going Creighton though.
I agree with you. However, about the higher seed with Louisville thing, I read this. Was Louisville ranked? What were they ranked at the end of this year?
14th.
14th or 13th, something like that. They said in the past, 8 years or something, that national seed has been ranked number 3, number 4, number 3, number 5, and then you have Louisville at 8 here. Were their wins not quality this year? How'd they get that ranking?
They have no quality wins. They beat, I think, Clemson twice. Anybody else they played that was worth it, they got beat by. It's just, the ACC was kind of down. Not kind of down. I'll be very blunt. It was awful this year. Duke had a combined average win of 18 plus. There were steamrolling teams. That is my thing with the NCAA tournament. That's why I said Florida got shafted. Florida ended up with a better record than Auburn. I believe they won 3 games in a row to win the SEC championship, all versus top 15 opponents, 2 versus 2 top 10 teams in the country to end the year. And like I said, I don't know. It got to the point when I saw the rankings and saw the brackets that I said, just take out conference tournaments then. Just take them out. Eliminate them. Because you're not even rewarding the team that went through the most grueling conference tournament. I think this is the best conference I've ever seen. And I'm 32 years old. I don't think I've seen nothing like this. Maybe besides old Big East when there was 9 good teams. But to have 14 teams in the field, I mean, come on now. We got to be a little serious at this point.
NCAA record.
Yeah, I've never seen that. So to be 29-4 like Florida, to be second in your conference, to then win your conference tournament and then get the worst seeding you could have got for a 1 seed, it kind of blows my mind.
So again, I said it before: 1 seed, 1 seed, 1 seed. South region, Tevin, does it go 4 for 4? Who is your pick to win this region?
This should be a cakewalk, sadly, for Auburn if it's the same Auburn you got for 85% of the year. They're going to be too big, too strong, athletic. They got Tashad Pettiford off the bench. He's going to be a top 15 to 20 pick. When you have guys like that coming off the bench, you have Bruce Pearl, who's a head case of a coach. He's nuts. The only way that team loses, though, is if they continue on the path of what they've been on. They look kind of like frustrated with each other. That kid is starting to kind of lose his cool a little bit. They might have their own hiccups, but I don't believe it's enough hiccups to give them problems yet. Maybe at some point, maybe like I said, that Iowa State. I don't think Tom Izzo and them score enough for me. But if you should have to see Iowa State and you're having problems still, that's a game that Iowa State can pull off. Them in Houston, I would them in Florida, Auburn, Florida. I would say they're the two ones that might not get there. If I had to pick the two of them that might not, only because Auburn's problems and Florida's bracket.
Well, your bracket has those two moving on, and those two would be playing each other in the Final Four. SEC, you have Florida, you have Auburn. Who is going to the finals between those two teams?
I'll still have to go with Auburn inside. I think that it's just you live and die by the three. Auburn defends it well. When they're on their stuff, when Auburn's coming there to play Auburn basketball, they defend the line well. They're physical. They're big. I think Florida big guys are like nowhere near in the same class as those guys when they all come to play. So I would take Auburn in the size and kind of what they did all year. I'd still rock with them getting to the finals.
Going to the other side, Duke, Houston. Do the Blue Devil fans have something to finally see for the first time in? It wasn't too long ago, but it was a little while now for expectations for the Blue Devils. Do they make it to the finals, or do we see Houston beating them?
Houston will give them probably the best shot they can get. Can have to beat them. Sadly, like I said earlier, I believe that they have true NBA size. They have a 6'5", 6'6" shooting guard, 6'8", 6'9" small forward. Two big guys that are over 7 feet that bang. Another third one off the bench that I just found out of. Give me the Duke Blue Devils sadly all day in this one. I think we get a run back of the game earlier in the year. I believe they played like early December. It was right after Maui though, so it might even been like late November, early December though. Auburn won the Maui Invitational and flew across the country to go play Duke at Duke and lost in a 2-point game. I think we get that run back again, and we get a Duke Auburn final.
So the finals, Auburn. And you have the Duke Blue Devils. We have a good friend of ours, Brett, who at this point in the video is going to be getting very close to the screen to hear Tevin let him know, will his team be national champions in 2025, or is Auburn taking it home like old me said a couple months ago, or even a couple weeks ago? Who we got?
And then if I have to pick that game, and that game matters for all the marbles, I feel like if Auburn gets to that point, they're in the finals, and they're locked in. Because at that point, I would imagine you beat Florida a second time, you're going to be very locked in at that point. I believe Auburn will pull it off. I believe that they're old team. Duke will still. I mean, at the end of the day, right? I believe the NBA size. You still have 3 freshmen playing in what would be their biggest game in their lives up to date. Give me the grown men every day of the week in that matchup.
So the national champions on Tevin's bracket is the Auburn Tigers.
Without a doubt.
I don't hate that pick. I'm a little nervous picking my bracket. I have Auburn there, but I can't pick between Florida. And I think I have Duke going to the finals as well. I think it scares me that it feels like a public type of bracket, which usually tells you that we're going to have a finals of like Liberty and, Yale. Yeah, for sure. Final question before we go. Final question here. Most outstanding player of the tournament. Who is the player that we're going to know about after this tournament, the casual fans at least, that may not know all these players in college? At the end, they're going to say, oh, this guy's for real. And in the NBA, I'm going to be watching him multiple days a week. And hopefully he's on my fantasy team.
Well, obviously, the best NBA guy is, we all know who. The big guy, our guy Cooper Flag over there. What I think a lot of people don't know about, there is a kid from BYU. He's like a freshman, I believe, or maybe his grade. He's a little older than what a true freshman is. I will get back to the name, but look out for BYU. They have an NBA prospect. It's Igor Denman. He's an 18-year-old that's projected to be a projected lottery pick. Remember that name, everyone. Igor Denman. He's an NBA player. They have a lot of shooters over there. They have an NBA, their coaching staff are all ex-NBA guys. They're very, very well, they're very old. The perfect setup. But they have an 18-year-old that no one's ever heard of that is going to be a lottery pick named Igor Denman that no one talks about all year. He's fantastic, though. He averages about 12 and 3. Don't be surprised if the NCAA tournament's a coming out party.
Well, move over Bilal Muhammad. It sounds like we have a new remember the name in college basketball and at Brigham Young University. Tevin, thank you so much for another year of great NCAA coverage. We'll be back, though, next week to cover if these picks were right or if they went through a wall down the basement. We'll talk about that. But in the meantime, make sure you follow Unknown Zone on Twitter. His name will be in the description. If you're a whatnot guy, if you're looking for sports cards, he's the one to go to. Best deals around. Gives better deals than I do. So make sure you go and see him. Unknown Zone, Twitter, whatnot, and on this YouTube video. As always, Tevin, my brother, appreciate you.
Always, man. Shout out to Rock Chalk Nation, baby. If I come back in next week, you guys ain't going to want to hear me if we're in that Sweet 16, baby.
I'll mute his mic. Don't worry, guys.
All right, Jimbo. Love you, brother.
Take it easy.